They thought I was the family charity case, the one who couldn't afford designer clothes, drove a 15-year-old Honda, and lived in a cramped studio apartment while they owned mansions. My name is Alex Thompson, I'm 35 years old, and to my wealthy relatives, I represented everything they feared becoming broke, ordinary, and forgotten. What they didn't realize was that while they flaunted their material possessions and competed for grandmother's inheritance money, I had been quietly building something they couldn't even comprehend. For 8 years, I had been living below my means, not because I had to, but because I chose to. Every dollar they spent on status symbols, I invested. Every luxury they indulged in, I turned into compound interest. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But at grandmother Maggie's 50th wedding anniversary memorial dinner, my sister-in-law Victoria decided to turn my apparent poverty into the evening's entertainment. She had no idea that the accountant sitting at the head table wasn't just there to read grandmother's annual gift announcements. Eleanor Whitman had come to reveal a balance that would change everything, a number so large it would make their trust funds look like pocket change. The misconception about my financial situation started innocently enough. When I graduated from college with a business degree, everyone expected me to follow the family tradition of joining prestigious firms and climbing corporate ladders. Instead, I took a modest position at a local credit union, helping regular people navigate their finances. The salary was adequate but unremarkable, exactly what my family expected from someone they considered lacking in ambition. My older brother Robert married Victoria Hayes 2 years after I started at the credit union. Victoria came from old money, the kind of wealth that gets passed down through generations like heirloom jewelry. She had never worked a day in her life, but she possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of luxury brands and social hierarchies. From the moment she joined our family, she appointed herself as the unofficial judge of everyone's success and status. Victoria took one look at my thrift store clothes, my aging Honda Civic, and my modest apartment in Cedar Grove, and immediately categorized me as the family disappointment. I became her favorite example of what happens when someone lacks proper ambition and financial acumen. She would often use me as a cautionary tale during family gatherings, warning younger cousins about settling for mediocrity. What Victoria and the rest of my family couldn't see was the systematic plan I had been executing since my first paycheck. While they bought new cars every 3 years and renovated their homes to match the latest trends, I was funneling every spare dollar into carefully researched investments. My apartment wasn't cramped because I couldn't afford better, it was strategic. My car wasn't old because I couldn't buy newer, it was paid off and reliable. Every financial decision I made was calculated to maximize my long-term wealth accumulation. I drove the same Honda for 15 years not out of necessity, but out of choice. While Victoria spent $40,000 on a new Mercedes every few years, I invested that money in index funds and real estate investment trusts. When my family took expensive vacations to Europe and the Caribbean, I took long weekends camping and hiking, investing the difference in my portfolio. When they bought designer clothes and jewelry to impress their social circles, I bought shares in the companies that manufactured those luxury goods. The beautiful irony was that Victoria often lectured me about money management while making some of the worst financial decisions I had ever witnessed. She would spend $300 on a single dinner at trendy restaurants, then complain about needing to dip into her trust fund to cover monthly expenses. She bought designer handbags that cost more than most people's rent, then expressed concern about having enough money for retirement. Her relationship with money was purely emotional. She spent it to feel important, successful, and socially relevant. My relationship with money was mathematical. Every purchase was analyzed through the lens of opportunity cost. Every dollar spent on consumption was a dollar that couldn't compound over decades. While Victor collected material possessions that depreciated in value, I accumulated assets that appreciated over time. The difference in our approaches was creating a wealth gap that none of them could imagine. My family's perception of me became increasingly entrenched over the years. At holiday gatherings, they would discuss their latest acquisitions and investments with the casual confidence of people who had never questioned their financial superiority. Victoria would talk about her stock portfolio as if managing inherited wealth required exceptional skill. Robert would brag about his salary increases and bonus payments as evidence of his business acumen. My cousins would compare their home values and vacation expenses like Olympic medals. During these conversations, I would sit quietly, occasionally nodding or asking simple questions that reinforced their belief in my financial naivety. When they discussed market trends, I would ask basic questions about terminology I understood better than they did. When they mentioned their investment returns, I would express amazement at numbers that represented a fraction of my actual portfolio performance. My apparent ignorance made them feel even more superior and financially sophisticated. The family dynamic became predictable and comfortable for everyone involved. They needed someone to look down upon, and I provided that service without complaint. They needed confirmation that their expensive lifestyles were justified, and my modest living arrangements gave them that validation. They needed to believe that their inherited advantages and high salaries made them financially superior, and my humble credit union job reinforced that belief. What they didn't understand was that I had learned from their mistakes before making any of my own. I watched Victoria spend her way through 2 trust funds and take loans against her third. I observed Robert's pattern of lifestyle inflation that kept him living paycheck to paycheck despite earning 6 figures. I studied my Uncle David's divorce settlements and saw how expensive tastes could destroy even substantial wealth. My family served as a masterclass in how not to manage money, and I took careful notes. By maintaining the appearance of financial struggle, I also avoided the family pressures that came with visible wealth. Nobody asked me for loans or investment advice. Nobody expected me to contribute more than my share to group gifts or family vacations. Nobody pressured me to upgrade my lifestyle or join their expensive social activities. My perceived poverty was actually protecting me from the financial obligations that came with appearing prosperous. The performance required constant vigilance and occasional sacrifices of pride. When Victoria would make cutting remarks about my worn-out shoes or outdated phone, I had to resist the urge to defend myself or reveal the truth. When family members would offer to help me financially or suggest career changes that might improve my situation, I had to graciously accept their concern, while internally calculating how much money their advice would cost me. When they would discuss their financial achievements with the subtle condescension reserved for those they considered less fortunate, I had to smile and nod appreciatively. But every slight comment and patronizing suggestion was an investment in my long-term strategy. Each time they underestimated my intelligence or capability, they revealed more about their own financial vulnerabilities and poor decisions. Every family gathering provided new insights into their spending patterns, investment mistakes, and financial.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Financial insecurities that I could learn from and avoid. Their arrogance was giving me a comprehensive education in wealth destruction that no business school could provide. The most challenging aspect of maintaining this deception wasn't the damage to my ego, it was watching my family make preventable financial mistakes that would impact their long-term security. I wanted to warn Robert about his over-leveraged real estate investments. I wanted to explain to Victoria why her spending patterns would eventually exhaust her inheritance. I wanted to help my cousins understand the power of compound interest and early investing. but intervening would have revealed my true knowledge and potentially compromised the strategic advantages of my perceived position. Instead, I became an expert at asking innocent questions that might lead them toward better decisions without appearing knowledgeable myself. I would wonder aloud about simple financial concepts that might spark their own research. I would express admiration for conservative investment strategies that might influence their thinking. I would share articles from financial magazines that I claimed to find confusing but thought they might understand better. My apparent ignorance became a vehicle for subtle education that they never recognized as advice. As the years passed, the gap between perception and reality grew wider. While they saw someone struggling to make ends meet, I was systematically building wealth that would eventually dwarf their inherited advantages. While they worried about my financial future, I was securing a level of independence they had never experienced. While they pitied my modest lifestyle, I was buying freedom from the social and financial pressures that controlled their lives. The greatest irony was that their condescension was funding my liberation from their entire value system. The deception explanation, my unconventional approach to wealth building, began during my junior year of college when I took an elective course called Personal Financial Planning. The professor, Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, was a former Wall Street analyst who had retired early after accumulating enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life. She was in her 40s but taught like someone who had discovered secrets that most people never learn. Dr. Morgan's first lesson shattered everything I thought I knew about money and status. She walked into class, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, drove a modest sedan, and lived in a small house near campus. Then she showed us her investment portfolio. The numbers on the screen represented more wealth than most of my classmates' families had accumulated over generations. She had achieved financial independence not through inheritance or high salaries, but through disciplined saving and intelligent investing over a relatively short period. The key insight that changed my entire perspective was her explanation of lifestyle inflation and status spending. She demonstrated how most high earners actually accumulate less wealth than moderate earners who live below their means. She showed us case studies of doctors, lawyers, and executives who earned substantial incomes but remained financially insecure because they spent everything they made on maintaining their professional image and social status. Meanwhile, teachers, firefighters, and other modest income professionals who saved and invested consistently built substantial nest eggs that provided true financial freedom. Dr. Morgan introduced us to the concept of stealth wealth, the practice of accumulating significant assets while maintaining an unremarkable public appearance. She explained how displaying wealth actually attracts financial obligations, social pressures, and relationship complications that can interfere with continued wealth building. People who appeared wealthy were expected to spend like wealthy people, which often prevented them from actually becoming wealthy. People who appeared ordinary could accumulate extraordinary wealth without interference from family, friends, or society. The mathematics of compound interest became my obsession after that course. Dr. Morgan showed us how small amounts invested consistently over long periods could grow into life-changing sums. $100 invested monthly starting at age 22 could become over $800,000 by retirement. $200 monthly could exceed $1.5 million. The key was starting early, staying consistent, and avoiding the temptation to spend money on immediate gratification instead of long-term security. I calculated that if I could live on 40% of my income and invest the remaining 60%, I could achieve financial independence within 15 years, regardless of my salary level. This meant that my job at the credit union, which my family considered a dead-end position, could actually fund a faster path to wealth than their high-paying careers if I managed the money correctly. While they spent their higher incomes on lifestyle expenses, I could invest my lower income more efficiently and achieve better long-term results. The psychology of my family dynamics made this strategy even more effective. Their need to maintain expensive appearances meant they couldn't save substantial portions of their income without compromising their social status. Their competitive spending habits meant they constantly increased their expenses to match or exceed each other's lifestyle choices. Their reliance on inheritance expectations meant they never developed the discipline necessary for independent wealth accumulation. Their financial arrogance meant they never questioned whether their approach was actually effective. I realized that joining their lifestyle competition would trap me in the same cycle of high income and high expenses that kept them financially vulnerable despite their apparent success. Instead, I could use their prejudices about modest living to my advantage. By appearing financially unsuccessful, I could avoid their expensive social obligations while quietly building the kind of wealth that would eventually make their trust funds irrelevant. My job at the credit union provided the perfect cover for this strategy. I worked with ordinary people who needed practical financial advice, which kept me grounded in real-world money management rather than the abstract wealth concepts that my family discussed. I learned about budgeting, debt management, and basic investing from people who couldn't afford financial mistakes. I understood the value of every dollar because I worked with people who had to make every dollar count. The credit union also provided access to investment options and financial education that I might not have discovered in a traditional corporate environment. I learned about low-cost index funds, tax-advantaged retirement accounts, and automated investing strategies that could build wealth without requiring constant attention or sophisticated financial knowledge. These tools were available to anyone regardless of income level, but most people didn't know how to use them effectively. My coworkers became inadvertent mentors in frugal living and practical money management. They taught me about shopping strategies, home maintenance, and lifestyle choices that could dramatically reduce expenses without sacrificing quality of life. They showed me how to find satisfaction and happiness through relationships, experiences, and personal growth rather than material acquisitions. They demonstrated that financial security was more valuable than financial display. The contrast between my work environment and my family environment created a unique perspective on money and values. At work, I helped people who earned modest incomes build stable financial foundations through careful planning and disciplined saving. At family gatherings, I watched people who earned substantial incomes struggle with debt, financial stress, and money-related relationship conflicts. The lesson was clear. Income level was less important than spending discipline and investment strategy. I developed a detailed financial plan that would allow me to accumulate significant wealth while maintaining my appearance of financial struggle. I automated my investments so that money was transferred to my accounts immediately after each paycheck before I could be tempted to spend it. I chose low-cost index funds that would provide market returns without requiring active management or expensive advisory fees. I maximized my contributions to tax-advantaged retirement accounts that would compound tax-free for decades. My living arrangements were carefully calculated to support this strategy. I chose a small apartment in an unfashionable neighborhood that cost less than 20% of my income, leaving maximum money available for investing. I furnished it with durable, functional items purchased second-hand or on clearance rather than new furniture that would impress visitors. I avoided the subscription services, entertainment expenses, and dining costs that consumed large portions of most people's budgets. My transportation choices were equally strategic. I bought my Honda Civic, used but reliable, then maintained it meticulously to extend its useful life as long as possible. I avoided car payments, insurance costs, and depreciation expenses that came with newer vehicles. I calculated that keeping the same car for 15 years would save me over $60,000 compared to buying new cars every few years, money that could grow to over $200,000 when invested properly. My clothing and personal appearance required the most careful balance between frugality and professional appropriateness. I shopped at discount stores and outlet malls, but chose classic styles that wouldn't look obviously cheap or quickly outdated. I bought quality items when they were on sale rather than trendy items at full price. I focused on building a small wardrobe of versatile pieces rather than a large collection of specialized outfits. My food and entertainment expenses provided opportunities for substantial savings without significant lifestyle sacrifices. I learned to cook at home, which was both healthier and less expensive than eating out regularly. I found free and low-cost entertainment options like hiking, reading, and community events that provided satisfaction without depleting my investment funds. I socialized with friends who shared similar values rather than trying to keep up with expensive social activities. The most challenging aspect of this lifestyle was managing family expectations and social pressures without revealing my true financial position. I had to decline expensive family vacations and social events without appearing antisocial or bitter. I had to accept their concern about my apparent financial struggles without defensive explanations. I had to listen to their advice about career advancement and lifestyle improvement without revealing that I was already exceeding their financial performance through different methods. I developed strategies for deflecting their attention and concern without lying about my situation. When they asked about my finances, I would redirect the conversation to their successes and achievements. When they offered financial help, I would express gratitude while explaining that I preferred to manage on my own. When they suggested career changes or lifestyle upgrades, I would thank them for their concern while indicating that I was content with my current situation. The emotional challenge of maintaining this deception was offset by the mathematical certainty of my strategy's effectiveness. Every month, my investment account balances provided concrete evidence that my approach was working. Every quarterly statement showed compound growth that exceeded my family's spending on status symbols. Every annual review demonstrated progress toward financial independence that their high-income lifestyles couldn't match. As my wealth accumulated, I faced new decisions about investment diversification and risk management. I researched real estate investment trusts, international index funds, and bond allocations that could provide steady growth while protecting against market volatility. I consulted with fee-only financial advisors who could provide objective advice without trying to sell expensive investment products. I continued educating myself through books, podcasts, and online resources that could improve my investment knowledge and strategy. The growing gap between my apparent financial situation and my actual wealth created increasingly surreal family interactions. They would discuss financial concerns and investment decisions with the confidence of people who believed they were more sophisticated and successful than I was. They would offer advice about money management and career development based on assumptions about my financial ignorance and professional limitations. They would express sympathy for my apparent struggles while making spending decisions that demonstrated their own financial misconceptions. The connecting incident, the phone call that would eventually merge my carefully separated worlds, came on a Tuesday morning in late September. I was reviewing loan applications at my desk when Eleanor Whitman's voice came through the receiver with professional warmth and unmistakable authority. Eleanor had been grandmother Maggie's financial advisor for over 20 years, managing the family's substantial assets with the kind of discretion and competence that old money families valued above all else. Eleanor and I had developed an unusual relationship over the past 5 years. It began when grandmother Maggie mentioned during a family dinner that she was concerned about managing her investments in her advancing age. While my relatives immediately began discussing expensive financial advisory services and wealth management firms, I quietly suggested that she might benefit from a consultation with Eleanor, whom I had met through professional circles at the credit union. What my family didn't realize was that Eleanor and I had been corresponding regularly since that introduction. She had been impressed by my questions about fiduciary responsibility and fee structures, recognizing a level of financial sophistication that seemed inconsistent with my apparent economic status. Over time, our conversations evolved from professional courtesy to genuine mentorship as she discovered my investment knowledge and long-term financial planning abilities. Eleanor had gradually become aware of my actual financial situation through our discussions about investment strategies and market analysis. She never asked direct questions about my wealth, but her experience with high net worth clients made her sensitive to the signs of substantial assets. My questions about tax loss harvesting, asset allocation, and estate planning revealed knowledge that could only come from managing significant investments. My understanding of complex financial instruments and market dynamics suggested portfolio experience that exceeded what my salary could support. The morning Eleanor called, her voice carried an unusual tension that immediately captured my attention. She explained that grandmother Maggie had asked her to prepare detailed financial analyses for the upcoming anniversary memorial dinner, including comprehensive reports on all family members' financial situations. This was apparently a tradition that grandmother had maintained for several years, though my family had never mentioned it to me directly. Eleanor's concern stemmed from the scope of information that grandmother Maggie had requested. She wanted detailed reports on everyone's assets, liabilities, income sources, and financial projections. She wanted analysis of spending patterns, investment performance, and long-term financial sustainability. Most importantly, she wanted recommendations about inheritance planning and wealth transfer strategies that would benefit the family's next generation. The implications of this request created a complex situation for both Eleanor and me. As grandmother's financial advisor, Eleanor was obligated to provide accurate information based on available data. However, the financial information available through traditional sources would dramatically misrepresent my actual wealth and investment sophistication. My credit reports would show modest income and minimal debt, but wouldn't reveal my substantial investment accounts held at different institutions. My tax returns would reflect my salary but wouldn't capture the full scope of my asset accumulation. Eleanor explained that she had been struggling with how to handle my situation without violating professional ethics or betraying my apparent desire for financial privacy. She couldn't include false information in her reports, but she also couldn't reveal details about my wealth without my explicit consent. She was calling to ask how I wanted her to proceed with grandmother's request for comprehensive family financial analysis. I realized that this situation represented a potential turning point in my long-term strategy. For 8 years, I had successfully maintained the appearance of financial struggle while building substantial wealth. My family's perception of my economic status had become so entrenched that they no longer questioned it or paid attention to potential evidence of change. But grandmother's request for detailed financial analysis could potentially expose the gap between appearance and reality. The timing of this revelation was particularly significant because of recent developments in my family's financial situations. Robert and Victoria had been experiencing increasing pressure from their expensive lifestyle choices and over-leveraged investments. My uncle David was facing divorce proceedings that could substantially impact his wealth. Several cousins were struggling with student loans, mortgages, and career transitions that had strained their financial resources. My apparent poverty was providing them with psychological comfort during their own financial challenges. Eleanor and I discussed several potential approaches to managing this situation. We could continue maintaining the deception by having her report only my salary-based income and visible assets, which would reinforce my family's existing perceptions. We could reveal partial information about my wealth while understating the full extent of my financial success. We could prepare for complete disclosure while developing strategies for managing the family dynamics that would inevitably follow. I asked Eleanor about grandmother's motivations for requesting such comprehensive financial analysis. She explained that grandmother Maggie had become increasingly concerned about the family's long-term financial sustainability and wealth preservation. She had been observing spending patterns and lifestyle choices that suggested some family members might be living beyond their means or making poor investment decisions. She wanted professional analysis that could inform her inheritance planning and possibly provide guidance for family members who might benefit from financial education. This information revealed that grandmother might be more financially aware than my family realized. While they had always assumed that her inheritance distributions were based on favoritism or arbitrary decisions, she might actually be evaluating everyone's financial responsibility and long-term planning capabilities. My apparent frugality and modest lifestyle might have been creating a more positive impression than my family's expensive displays of wealth. Eleanor shared some additional insights about grandmother's financial philosophy that my family had never discussed. Grandmother Maggie had grown up during the Great Depression and had always believed that financial security came from careful saving and conservative investing rather than high income or inheritance dependency. She had built her own wealth through decades of disciplined money management and had observed how inherited wealth could either enhance or destroy the next generation's financial character. The possibility that grandmother might actually approve of my lifestyle choices and financial approach created new considerations for managing this situation. If she was evaluating family members based on financial responsibility rather than financial status, revealing my wealth accumulation strategy might actually improve my standing in her inheritance planning. My demonstrated ability to build wealth independently might carry more weight than my relatives' ability to spend inherited wealth attractively. Eleanor and I agreed that we needed more information about grandmother's specific intentions before determining the best approach. She would schedule a meeting with grandmother to clarify her objectives for the financial analysis and understand how she planned to use the information. This would help us assess whether disclosure would be beneficial or detrimental to my long-term interests and family relationships. Meanwhile, I needed to prepare for the possibility that my financial situation might be revealed at the anniversary memorial dinner. This meant considering how to manage my family's reactions, explain my investment strategy, and address their potential resentment about my deception. It also meant evaluating whether full disclosure might actually serve my interests better than continued secrecy. The conversation with Eleanor forced me to acknowledge that my wealth accumulation had reached a level where continued secrecy might be more complicated than beneficial. My investment accounts had grown to the point where they generated substantial passive income that exceeded my salary from the credit union. My financial independence was becoming real rather than theoretical, which meant I had less need for my family's approval or financial safety net. I also realized that maintaining this deception indefinitely would require increasingly complex strategies as my wealth continued growing. Tax implications, estate planning considerations, and investment management requirements were becoming sophisticated enough to require professional services that might be difficult to hide from my family's attention. The administrative aspects of substantial wealth were inherently visible in ways that could eventually expose my true financial situation, regardless of my efforts to maintain secrecy. Over the following days, I found myself analyzing this situation from multiple perspectives. From a financial standpoint, disclosure might provide access to investment opportunities and professional relationships that could enhance my wealth-building strategies. From a personal standpoint, disclosure might relieve the psychological burden of maintaining deception, while potentially improving my relationships with family members who discovered my true capabilities. From a strategic standpoint, disclosure might shift family dynamics in ways that could be either beneficial or problematic depending on how it was managed. Eleanor's call had essentially presented me with a choice between continuing my established strategy of financial secrecy and embracing a new approach based on selective transparency. The anniversary memorial dinner would provide a natural opportunity for this transition if I decided to pursue it. Grandmother's financial analysis would create a context where wealth revelation might seem like natural disclosure rather than deliberate deception. The irony of this situation was that my family's upcoming ceremony to discuss inheritance and wealth distribution might actually reveal that the person they considered least financially successful had become the most financially independent. Their expectations about receiving grandmother's wealth might be overshadowed by the discovery that I had already achieved the kind of financial security they were hoping to inherit. The personal stakes revelation. Eleanor's follow-up call came exactly 1 week later, and the information she shared transformed my understanding of both the upcoming dinner and my family's true financial condition. Grandmother Maggie had been more forthcoming during their private consultation than Eleanor had expected, revealing concerns and observations that painted a dramatically different picture of my relatives' economic situations than what they presented publicly. The most shocking revelation concerned Victoria and Robert's financial status. Despite their lavish lifestyle and constant displays of wealth, they were actually drowning in debt and facing potential bankruptcy within the next 18 months. Victoria's trust funds had been depleted years earlier through poor investment decisions and excessive spending. Robert's real estate investments were underwater, and he had been borrowing against his retirement accounts to maintain their lifestyle and meet mortgage payments on properties that were worth less than they owed. Eleanor explained that grandmother had been quietly monitoring everyone's financial situations through various means, including credit reports, public records, and discreet inquiries through her professional network. She had discovered that Victoria and Robert had been living on credit for several years, accumulating debt at an unsustainable pace while maintaining the appearance of prosperity. Their expensive cars were leased, their designer clothes were purchased on credit cards, and their recent vacation to Europe had been financed through a home equity loan against a property that was already over-leveraged. The depth of their financial deception was staggering. Victoria had been borrowing money from family members under various pretenses while telling others that she was doing well financially. She had convinced my Uncle David to co-sign a loan for what she claimed was a temporary cash flow issue, but had used the money to pay credit card bills and maintain her lifestyle. She had borrowed money from my cousin Jennifer by claiming she needed funds for a business investment opportunity, but had spent it on luxury purchases and vacation expenses. Robert's situation was equally precarious. His construction business was failing due to his poor financial management and expensive personal spending habits. He had been using business credit lines to pay personal expenses, mixing company funds with household expenses in ways that could potentially expose him to legal liability. His attempts to maintain the appearance of business success had led him to accept contracts at below-cost pricing, creating a cycle of losses that was steadily depleting his remaining assets. Eleanor revealed that grandmother had been particularly concerned about Victoria's influence on other family members' financial decisions. Victoria had been positioning herself as a financial expert within the family, offering investment advice and encouraging spending patterns that grandmother recognized as potentially destructive. Several younger family members had been following Victoria's guidance about lifestyle choices and financial priorities, potentially setting themselves up for similar financial problems in the future. The implications of this information were profound for understanding the dynamics that would likely unfold at the anniversary dinner. Victoria's aggressive mockery of my apparent financial struggles was probably motivated by her own financial insecurity and need to deflect attention from her true situation. Her emphasis on status symbols and luxury spending was likely an attempt to maintain credibility as the family's financial success story while hiding her actual economic distress. This revelation also explains some of Victoria's recent behavior that had seemed unusually hostile even by her standards. She had been making increasingly cutting comments about my lifestyle choices and career decisions, almost as if she needed to convince herself and others that her approach was superior to mine. Her lectures about financial success and wealth building had become more frequent and more condescending, suggesting that she might be trying to reinforce her own confidence in decisions that were actually destroying her financial security. Eleanor shared additional details about other family members' situations that revealed a pattern of financial stress and poor decision-making that contradicted their public presentations. My uncle David was facing substantial legal fees and property division costs from his divorce proceedings. My cousin Jennifer was struggling with student loan payments and had been relying on credit cards to supplement her income. My cousin Mike had been living beyond his means since graduating from college, accumulating debt while trying to maintain a lifestyle that his entry-level salary couldn't support. The contrast between their apparent wealth and actual financial situations created a complex web of deception and mutual enabling that had been hidden from my view. They had been supporting each other's illusions about financial success while collectively moving toward economic instability. Their competitive spending and status displays had created pressure for everyone to maintain expensive appearances regardless of their ability to afford them. Grandmother's awareness of these situations explained her request for comprehensive financial analysis before the anniversary dinner. She was apparently planning to use the evening not just for traditional inheritance announcements, but for addressing the family's financial problems and potentially providing guidance or intervention for members who needed help. Her decision to invite Eleanor to present detailed financial reports suggested that she intended to confront reality rather than continue enabling delusions. This context completely changed my understanding of how the evening might unfold. Instead of being the family gathering where I continued to be patronized for my apparent financial inadequacy, it might become an intervention where everyone's true financial situations were revealed and discussed. Instead of being the target of Victoria's condescending advice about money management, I might witness her exposure as someone who had been systematically destroying her own financial foundation while criticizing others. Eleanor also revealed that grandmother had specifically asked about my financial situation and had expressed surprise when Eleanor indicated that my actual wealth accumulation was significantly different from what the family believed. Grandmother had apparently been impressed by my lifestyle choices and had suspected that my frugality might reflect better financial judgment than my relatives' expensive habits. She had been particularly interested in learning whether my modest living was due to financial necessity or strategic choice. The possibility that grandmother might have been evaluating my financial character positively while becoming concerned about other family members' financial decisions created new considerations for how to handle the upcoming revelation. If grandmother respected my approach to money management, disclosure of my actual wealth might enhance rather than damage my standing within the family hierarchy. If she was planning to address other members' financial problems, my success story might serve as an example of effective wealth-building strategies. Eleanor and I discussed the ethical implications of maintaining my deception given grandmother's apparent intentions for the dinner. If grandmother was planning to provide financial guidance or assistance based on her understanding of everyone's situations, allowing her to continue believing that I needed help while others were successful would be misleading her in ways that could affect her decisions. If she was planning to use inheritance distributions to address financial emergencies, my apparent poverty might result in resources being directed away from family members who actually needed assistance. We also considered the psychological impact on Victoria and others when their financial situations were revealed. Learning that the family member they had been pitying and patronizing was actually the most financially successful could be devastating for people whose self-worth was closely tied to their economic status. The revelation might create resentment, embarrassment, and relationship damage that could persist long after the immediate crisis passed. However, Eleanor pointed out that continued deception might ultimately be more harmful than disclosure. If Victoria and Robert's financial situation continued deteriorating without intervention, they could face bankruptcy, foreclosure, and other consequences that would affect the entire family. If other family members continued following their example without understanding the true results of their approach, more people could end up in financial distress. If grandmother continued making inheritance and financial decisions based on incomplete information, her efforts to help the family might be misdirected and ineffective. The conversation forced me to confront the reality that my individual strategy for wealth building was now intersecting with broader family financial dynamics in ways that could no longer be managed through simple secrecy. The anniversary dinner was apparently going to address financial issues whether I participated actively or not. The question was whether my involvement would be helpful or harmful for everyone concerned. Eleanor recommended that I consider partial disclosure as a compromise approach. I could allow her to report my actual investment performance and wealth accumulation without providing complete details about my strategy or current asset levels. This would give grandmother accurate information for her planning purposes while maintaining some privacy about the full extent of my financial situation. It would also provide an opportunity to gauge family reactions before deciding whether to pursue complete transparency. We agreed that Eleanor would prepare two versions of her report about my financial situation. One would reflect only the information visible through public records and standard financial sources, maintaining the appearance of modest means that my family expected. The other would include my actual investment accounts and wealth accumulation, providing grandmother with accurate information for her planning purposes. The decision about which version to present could be made based on how the evening developed and what seemed most appropriate given grandmother's intentions. This conversation with Eleanor marked the end of my ability to maintain complete separation between my financial strategy and my family relationships. The anniversary dinner would inevitably involve discussions about money, wealth, and financial planning that would make continued deception either impossible or counterproductive. The question was no longer whether to reveal my wealth, but how to manage the revelation in ways that would be beneficial for everyone involved. The forced participation, the formal invitation to grandmother Maggie's anniversary memorial dinner arrived 3 days after my final conversation with Eleanor, delivered in an elegant cream envelope with hand-calligraphed addressing that suggested this event would be more formal and significant than our usual family gatherings. Inside, the invitation specified formal attire and indicated that the evening would include a special presentation about family financial planning and legacy considerations. The language was carefully crafted, but it clearly indicated that attendance was expected rather than optional. I had been hoping to avoid the dinner entirely, claiming work obligations or personal commitments that would allow me to postpone this confrontation indefinitely. My strategy for managing family relationships had always relied on limiting exposure and maintaining emotional distance, showing up just enough to avoid being completely excluded, but not enough to invite detailed scrutiny of my lifestyle or choices. Major family events created opportunities for extended interaction and observation that could potentially threaten the careful balance I had maintained. However, grandmother Maggie had apparently anticipated potential resistance to this particular gathering. Along with the formal invitation, she had included a handwritten note specifically addressed to me expressing her hope that I would prioritize attending this event. She mentioned that Eleanor Whitman would be presenting information that could be beneficial for my financial planning and future security. She indicated that family financial discussions had been postponed too long, and that everyone needed to participate in conversations about wealth preservation and inheritance planning. The personal note made it impossible to decline without appearing disrespectful or ungrateful. Grandmother had always been the one family member who treated me with consistent kindness and respect regardless of my apparent financial situation. She had never made condescending comments about my lifestyle choices or offered unsolicited advice about career advancement. She had seemed to understand that my modesty might reflect personal values rather than economic necessity. Her direct request for my attendance carried emotional weight that I couldn't easily dismiss. Robert called me the following evening to ensure that I had received the invitation and understood its importance. His tone carried an unusual urgency that suggested he was more concerned about this gathering than typical family events. He mentioned that grandmother had been asking detailed questions about everyone's financial situations and future plans, indicating that this dinner might involve more serious discussions than our usual social conversations. Robert also revealed that Victoria had been particularly interested in my attendance at this dinner. She had apparently been telling other family members that this would be an excellent opportunity for me to receive financial education and guidance from Eleanor, whom she described as one of the most sophisticated wealth management professionals in the region. Victoria seemed to believe that my exposure to high-level financial planning concepts might inspire me to make better career decisions and improve my economic situation. The irony of Victoria's enthusiasm for my financial education was almost overwhelming. She was eagerly anticipating an evening where she expected to demonstrate her financial sophistication while watching me receive basic lessons about money management. She had no idea that this same evening might expose her own financial failures while revealing my wealth accumulation success. Her confidence about the comparative value of our respective financial knowledge was about to be tested in ways she couldn't imagine. Robert's call also revealed some additional pressure from other family members who had been encouraging my attendance. My Uncle David had apparently mentioned that young people like me needed to start thinking seriously about financial planning and wealth building rather than just living paycheck to paycheck. My cousin Jennifer had suggested that exposure to Eleanor's expertise might help me understand investment strategies that could improve my long-term security. Even my younger cousin Mike had offered to drive me to the dinner to ensure that transportation wouldn't be an obstacle to my participation. Their collective concern about my financial education and future planning would have been touching if it weren't so completely misguided. They genuinely believed they were helping me by ensuring my attendance at an event where I could learn from their example and receive professional guidance about building wealth. They had no concept that I might already understand these topics better than they did, or that my apparent financial struggles might reflect strategic choices rather than economic limitations. The family pressure also revealed how much my attendance had become important for their own psychological comfort. They needed me to be present as the family member who represented financial failure, providing contrast that made their own situations seem successful and secure. My absence from this financial planning discussion would deprive them of the opportunity to demonstrate their superior knowledge and offer charitable guidance to someone less fortunate. My presence would validate their roles as financially successful family members who could afford to be generous with advice and education. I realized that declining this invitation would create more complications than attending. My absence would generate questions and speculation about my motivations that could potentially lead to unwanted investigation of my actual circumstances. Family members might begin wondering whether I was avoiding financial discussions because I was embarrassed about debt, legal problems, or other issues that would require their intervention. They might decide to investigate my situation more thoroughly out of concern or curiosity, potentially discovering information that would expose my deception. More importantly, grandmother's personal request and Eleanor's involvement suggested that this dinner might provide an opportunity to address the family's financial problems in ways that could be beneficial for everyone. If grandmother was planning to confront the reality of various family members' situations, My presence might be necessary for ensuring that accurate information was presented and appropriate decisions were made. If Eleanor was going to reveal concerning information about other family members' financial condition, I might need to be available to provide support or assistance as situations developed. I also recognized that continued avoidance of family financial discussions was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain as my wealth accumulated. Eventually, tax implications, estate planning requirements, and investment management needs would create visible evidence of my financial success that could be difficult to hide from family attention. The anniversary dinner might provide a controlled environment for managing this transition rather than waiting for accidental discovery that could create more dramatic complications. My decision to attend was ultimately motivated by the recognition that this confrontation was inevitable, and that managing it proactively would be preferable to having it forced upon me by circumstances beyond my control. Eleanor's involvement provided professional mediation that could help navigate the emotional and psychological challenges that would arise when family members discovered the gap between appearance and reality. Grandmother's apparent awareness of various financial problems suggested that she might be prepared to handle revelations and disruptions that would be necessary for addressing underlying issues. I called Robert back the following day to confirm my attendance, indicating that I appreciated grandmother's personal invitation and understood the importance of family financial planning discussions. I mentioned that I was looking forward to learning from Eleanor's expertise and participating in conversations about wealth preservation and inheritance considerations. My enthusiasm was calculated to reinforce their expectations about my financial ignorance while ensuring that I would be present for whatever revelations and confrontations the evening might bring. The final week before the dinner created an unusual period of anticipation and preparation that differed significantly from my usual approach to family gatherings. Instead of simply showing up with minimal expectations and hoping to leave early, I needed to prepare for complex emotional and psychological dynamics that could permanently change my relationships with family members. Instead of maintaining my typical role as the quiet observer who avoided attention, I might need to actively participate in discussions about financial strategies and wealth management that would reveal my true knowledge and capabilities. Eleanor and I exchanged several calls during this week to coordinate our approach and ensure that we were prepared for various scenarios that might develop. We agreed that she would begin her presentation with general information about family financial planning and wealth preservation before moving into specific analysis of individual situations. This would provide context for understanding everyone's circumstances while allowing natural opportunities for disclosure and discussion as appropriate. We also discussed strategies for managing the emotional reactions that would inevitably occur when family members discovered information that contradicted their assumptions and expectations. Eleanor's experience with high net worth families had taught her about the psychological dynamics that emerged when financial revelations disrupted established relationship patterns. She was prepared to provide professional guidance and mediation that could help everyone process information and adjust their understanding without unnecessary trauma or conflict. The evening was now set to unfold in ways that would either validate 8 years of careful financial strategy or expose me to family scrutiny and potential resentment that could affect our relationships permanently. Either way, the anniversary memorial dinner would mark the end of my ability to maintain complete separation between my financial success and my family identity. The choice was no longer whether to reveal my wealth, but how to manage the revelation in ways that would be constructive rather than destructive for everyone involved. The power display environment Riverside Manor stood like a monument to wealth and tradition on the hills overlooking Millbrook Heights, its Georgian architecture commanding respect from everyone who approached its circular drive. The building had been designed in the 1920s to host the social gatherings of the region's most prominent families, and nearly a century later, it still served that purpose with understated elegance that spoke of old money and established power. Grandmother Maggie had chosen this venue specifically for its ability to create the right atmosphere for serious family discussions about wealth, legacy, and financial responsibility. The Heritage Room occupied the manor's east wing, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the valley below, while crystal chandeliers cast warm light over mahogany paneling and Persian rugs that had witnessed decades of important conversations among influential families. The room's furnishings had been selected to convey both comfort and gravitas, with leather-bound chairs arranged around a massive oak table that could seat 20 people without crowding. Oil paintings of distinguished ancestors adorned the walls, their stern expressions suggesting the weight of generational responsibility that came with inherited wealth. I arrived at Riverside Manor 30 minutes before the scheduled dinner time, hoping to observe the family dynamics as they developed, rather than walking into an already established social hierarchy. My 15-year-old Honda looked distinctly out of place among the luxury vehicles that were beginning to fill the valet parking area. Mercedes sedans, BMW SUVs, and Lexus coupes gleamed under the manor's exterior lighting, their pristine condition and current-year models reflecting their owners' commitment to maintaining appearances regardless of underlying financial realities. The manor's staff greeted each arrival with professional courtesy that suggested they were accustomed to serving wealthy families and understood the importance of creating an atmosphere of respect and discretion. They took coats and keys with the kind of efficiency that made guests feel important while ensuring that every detail was managed seamlessly. The contrast between their treatment of my modest appearance and their response to my relatives' obvious affluence was subtle but noticeable, reflecting social conditioning that equated expensive clothing and accessories with personal worth and social significance. Victoria arrived precisely on time, emerging from Robert's latest Mercedes wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her jewelry caught the light as she moved, diamond earrings and a platinum necklace creating sparkles that drew attention and communicated her financial status to everyone present. Her confidence was palpable as she surveyed the room, clearly in her element among surroundings that matched her self-image as a sophisticated woman of means. She moved through the space as if she owned it, greeting staff members with the kind of casual authority that came from years of expecting superior service. Robert followed behind her, wearing a custom-tailored suit that emphasized his successful businessman image while concealing the stress that had been increasingly visible in his face over recent months. His smile was practiced and professional, the kind of expression that had served him well in business meetings and social gatherings where confidence was expected regardless of underlying circumstances. He shook hands firmly and made eye contact with everyone he encountered, maintaining the persona of financial success that had become essential to his professional and personal identity. My Uncle David arrived shortly after, accompanied by his new girlfriend Sandra, a woman 20 years younger, who seemed impressed by the manor's opulence and his apparent ability to afford such exclusive venues. David had clearly been working to project an image of continued prosperity despite his ongoing divorce proceedings and the legal fees that were depleting his assets. His choice to bring Sandra to this family gathering suggested either supreme confidence in his financial position or desperate need to maintain appearances even among family members who might eventually discover his true situation. My cousin Jennifer arrived with her husband Marcus, both dressed conservatively but expensively in a way that suggested they were trying to fit in with family members they perceived as more financially successful. Jennifer had always been somewhat intimidated by Victoria's wealth and social confidence, and her body language tonight suggested she was particularly eager to make a good impression in this formal setting. Marcus looked uncomfortable in his rental tuxedo, clearly more at ease in casual environments than in venues designed to showcase wealth and social status. My younger cousin Mike arrived last, driving a sports car that was obviously leased but provided the visual impact he wanted for his entrance. At 25, he was still establishing his professional identity and seemed to view family gatherings as opportunities to demonstrate his progress toward the kind of success that older relatives had achieved. His designer watch and expensive shoes suggested that he was investing heavily in his appearance, possibly at the expense of building actual financial security. As family members gathered in the Heritage Room's reception area, their conversations naturally gravitated toward topics that allowed them to display their financial knowledge and success. Victoria dominated these discussions, sharing details about recent investment decisions and luxury purchases, with the kind of casual confidence that suggested money was never a concern for her. She mentioned her latest art acquisition, a vacation property she was considering purchasing, and stock recommendations she had received from her private wealth advisor. Robert contributed stories about business deals and construction projects that were generating substantial profits, painting a picture of entrepreneurial success that masked the underlying reality of his company's financial struggles. He discussed expansion plans and new contracts with the enthusiasm of someone whose business was thriving rather than someone who was desperately trying to avoid bankruptcy. His ability to maintain this facade in front of family members who trusted his business acumen was both impressive and disturbing. David shared updates about his divorce settlement negotiations with the confidence of someone who expected to emerge from the process with his wealth intact. He mentioned property valuations and asset divisions as if they were routine business transactions rather than proceedings that were threatening his financial stability. His casual discussion of legal fees and settlement terms suggested either genuine confidence in his position or masterful acting designed to prevent family concern about his situation. The younger cousins listened to these conversations with obvious admiration and envy, clearly viewing the older generation as examples of the financial success they hoped to achieve. Jennifer asked Victoria for investment advice, seeking recommendations about stock purchases and retirement planning strategies. Mike expressed interest in Robert's business ventures, wondering whether there might be opportunities for him to get involved in profitable construction projects. Their deference to the perceived financial experts in the family was creating a dynamic where poor advice was being treated as wisdom. Throughout these conversations, I maintained my usual role as the quiet observer who occasionally asked basic questions that reinforced their perception of my financial ignorance. When Victoria mentioned her investment portfolio, I asked simple questions about terminology that I understood better than she did. When Robert discussed his business profits, I expressed amazement at numbers that represented a fraction of my actual investment returns. When David mentioned property values, I wondered aloud about concepts like appreciation and equity that I had been leveraging successfully for years. My apparent naivety seemed to increase their confidence and willingness to share details about their financial situations that they might have kept private in other circumstances. They enjoyed explaining concepts they thought I couldn't understand, offering advice about money management strategies they assumed I had never considered. Their need to demonstrate superior knowledge was providing me with information about their actual financial decision-making processes that revealed significant gaps between their confident presentations and their actual competence. Victoria was particularly eager to position herself as my financial mentor for the evening, suggesting that I should pay careful attention to Eleanor's presentation and take notes about concepts that might help me improve my situation. She offered to explain any terminology that might be confusing, and suggested that I should feel free to ask questions about investment strategies and wealth-building approaches that successful people used. Her condescending kindness was motivated by genuine belief that she was more financially sophisticated than I was. The Heritage Room's formal dinner setup reflected grandmother Maggie's intention to create an atmosphere of serious discussion about important family matters. The table had been arranged with place cards that positioned family members strategically, with grandmother at the head and Eleanor seated to her right in a position that emphasized her role as the evening's financial expert. My seat was positioned between Jennifer and Mike, apparently reflecting grandmother's assessment of my status within the family hierarchy. Crystal water glasses and wine goblets had been placed at each setting alongside fine china that bore the manor's distinctive crest, creating an atmosphere of formality that suggested this gathering was more significant than typical family dinners. Fresh flowers and elegant centerpieces decorated the table without obstructing sightlines, ensuring that everyone would be able to see and hear Eleanor's presentation clearly. The lighting had been adjusted to provide comfortable visibility while creating an intimate atmosphere that would encourage open discussion. As we took our designated seats, the conversation continued to focus on financial topics with increasing intensity. Victoria seemed particularly energized by the formal setting, treating it as a stage where she could demonstrate her wealth and financial expertise to a captive audience. She discussed her children's private school tuition and college planning with the casual confidence of someone who had never questioned her ability to afford educational expenses. She mentioned family vacation plans and luxury purchases, as if they were routine decisions rather than significant financial commitments. The irony of this environment was almost overwhelming as I observed family members who were secretly struggling financially competing to project images of prosperity and success. They had chosen clothing, accessories, and conversation topics designed to reinforce their positions in the family's perceived wealth hierarchy, unaware that their actual financial situations might be quite different from what others believed. The formal setting was amplifying their need to maintain appearances while creating pressure for increasingly elaborate displays of affluence. Eleanor's arrival at precisely 7 o'clock shifted the room's energy toward more focused attention on the evening's official purpose. She entered with professional confidence, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing clothing that suggested competence and authority without competing with the family members' obvious efforts to display wealth. Her greeting to grandmother was warm and respectful, while her acknowledgement of other family members was politely professional, establishing her role as an expert advisor rather than a social participant. The transition from cocktail conversation to formal dinner seating created natural opportunities for family members to continue positioning themselves within the group's social and financial hierarchy. Victoria made sure to mention her familiarity with similar venues and events, suggesting that formal dining at exclusive locations was routine for her lifestyle. Robert discussed business meetings he had conducted at comparable establishments, reinforcing his image as someone who regularly operated in sophisticated professional environments. As the first course was served, grandmother Maggie officially welcomed everyone to the anniversary memorial dinner and explained that this year's gathering would include special presentations about family financial planning and wealth preservation strategies. She indicated that Eleanor would be sharing analysis and recommendations that could benefit everyone's long-term financial security and help ensure that family wealth was preserved and enhanced for future generations. The formal introduction of the evening's educational component created anticipation among family members who were expecting to receive valuable financial advice while potentially learning concerning information about others' situations. Victoria's excitement was particularly visible as she prepared to demonstrate her financial sophistication while watching others receive basic education about concepts she assumed she already understood. The stage was now set for revelations that would completely transform everyone's understanding of their relative financial positions within the family. The opening attacks. Victoria wasted no time establishing her dominance once the formal dinner service began, launching into a detailed monologue about her family's recent financial achievements that was clearly designed to impress Eleanor, while reminding everyone else of their inferior economic status. She described her children's academic accomplishments at their exclusive private academy with the kind of casual pride that suggested money was never an obstacle to providing the best opportunities. Madison's early acceptance to Princeton and Connor's admission to Stanford's pre-med program were presented as natural outcomes of superior parenting and unlimited educational resources. Her discussion of educational investments seamlessly transitioned into broader commentary about the importance of financial planning and wealth management strategies that separated successful families from those who struggled with economic limitations. Victoria positioned herself as someone who understood these concepts intuitively, having grown up in an environment where sophisticated financial decision-making was simply part of daily life. She mentioned her family's diversified investment portfolio, their multiple property holdings, and their long-term estate planning strategies, with the kind of detailed knowledge that suggested extensive experience managing substantial wealth. Throughout this presentation, Victoria made strategic references to family members who might benefit from learning about these advanced financial concepts, looking meaningfully in my direction, while discussing the importance of starting investment planning early, rather than waiting until it was too late to build meaningful wealth. Her tone was carefully modulated to sound helpful and educational rather than directly critical, but the implications were clear to everyone at the table. She was establishing herself as the family's financial expert, while identifying me as someone who needed basic education about money management. Eleanor listened to Victoria's commentary with the kind of professional attention that wealth management advisors typically provided to prospective clients, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions that encouraged continued discussion. Her responses were diplomatically neutral, neither confirming nor challenging Victoria's assertions about financial strategies and investment performance. This professional courtesy seemed to validate Victoria's expertise in the eyes of other family members who were observing these interactions carefully. Robert contributed supporting commentary that reinforced Victoria's position while highlighting his own business success and financial acumen. He discussed recent construction contracts and development projects with the confidence of someone whose company was thriving rather than someone who was desperately trying to avoid bankruptcy. His description of expansion plans and investment opportunities painted a picture of entrepreneurial success that masked the underlying reality of his deteriorating financial situation. The tag team approach that Victoria and Robert employed created a powerful presentation of financial success and sophistication that dominated the early dinner conversation. They seamlessly supported each other's claims about investment returns, business profits, and wealth accumulation strategies, while positioning themselves as the family members who had achieved the kind of success that others should aspire to emulate. Their coordinated performance was convincing enough that even family members, who might have had some awareness of their challenges, were impressed by their apparent prosperity. My uncle David attempted to participate in these discussions by sharing updates about his own investment portfolio and property holdings, but his contributions lacked the confident detail that characterized Victoria and Robert's presentations. His comments about real estate values and stock market performance seemed more tentative and less specific, suggesting either genuine uncertainty about his financial position or discomfort with discussing details that might reveal concerning information. His recent divorce proceedings had apparently affected his ability to project the same kind of financial confidence that had characterized his participation in previous family gatherings. The younger family members listened to these conversations with obvious admiration and some envy, clearly viewing the older generation as examples of the financial success they hoped to achieve in their own careers. Jennifer asked respectful questions about investment strategies and retirement planning approaches, seeking advice from family members she perceived as more financially sophisticated. Mike expressed interest in learning about business opportunities and wealth-building techniques that might help him accelerate his own path toward prosperity. As the discussion continued, Victoria's attention gradually focused more specifically on my apparent need for financial education and guidance. She began directing comments toward me with increasing frequency, offering explanations of basic investment concepts that she assumed I had never encountered. Her tone remained friendly and helpful, but the underlying condescension was becoming more obvious as she gained confidence in her role as the evening's financial mentor. Victoria's first direct comment to me concerned the importance of starting retirement planning early rather than waiting until financial security became an urgent concern. She explained that compound interest was most effective when investments had decades to grow, suggesting that my current age represented either an excellent opportunity to begin building wealth or possibly the last chance to achieve meaningful financial security. Her advice was technically accurate, but delivered with the kind of patient explanation typically reserved for children learning basic math concepts. She followed this general guidance with more specific recommendations about investment vehicles and financial planning strategies that she thought might be appropriate for someone in my position. Victoria suggested that I should consider opening a retirement account through my employer and making regular contributions even if the amounts seemed small compared to my current expenses. She explained that consistent saving habits were more important than large individual investments, especially for people whose incomes limited their ability to make substantial financial commitments. Her commentary about my employment situation was particularly pointed, delivered with the kind of sympathetic concern that made criticism sound like caring advice. Victoria suggested that working at a credit union probably provided excellent learning opportunities about basic financial services and money management principles that could serve as foundation knowledge for eventual personal wealth building. She indicated that exposure to other people's financial challenges might help me understand the importance of avoiding common mistakes that kept people trapped in cycles of economic limitation. The implication that my job was primarily valuable as an educational experience rather than a career path was delivered with such gentle kindness that disagreeing would have seemed ungrateful and defensive. Victoria's ability to diminish my professional accomplishments while appearing supportive and encouraging demonstrated sophisticated social manipulation that was designed to maintain her superior position while appearing to offer assistance. Her suggestions about career advancement and professional development were framed as helpful guidance rather than criticism of my current choices. As Victoria's commentary became more specifically focused on my situation, other family members began contributing their own observations and suggestions about financial planning strategies that might benefit someone in my position. Robert offered advice about budgeting techniques and expense management approaches that could help stretch limited income further. David suggested investment options that might be appropriate for people who couldn't afford significant financial risks or complex investment strategies. The collective effect of their well-intentioned advice was to reinforce their shared perception of my financial limitations while demonstrating their own superior knowledge and experience. Each contribution to the discussion strengthened the consensus that I was the family member who needed guidance and education, while they were the ones qualified to provide expertise and direction. Their genuine desire to help me improve my situation made their condescension more palatable while making any defensive response seem inappropriate and ungrateful. Jennifer and Mike added their own perspective to these discussions, sharing information about financial planning resources and educational opportunities that might help me develop better money management skills. Jennifer mentioned budgeting apps and personal finance websites that had helped her organize her own financial planning efforts. Mike suggested books and podcasts that provided basic education about investing and wealth building for people who were just beginning to learn about these topics. The unanimous assumption that I needed basic financial education from family members who possessed superior knowledge and experience created a dynamic where any indication of actual competence on my part would seem presumptuous and inappropriate. The conversation had established clear roles where they were the teachers, and I was the student, where they possessed wisdom, and I required guidance, where they had achieved success, and I represented potential that might be realized with proper instruction and effort. Eleanor observed these interactions with professional interest, occasionally asking questions that encouraged family members to elaborate on their financial strategies and investment approaches. Her inquiries seemed designed to understand their knowledge level and decision-making processes, rather than to challenge their assertions or correct misconceptions. This diplomatic approach maintained the comfortable dynamic that allowed Victoria and others to continue demonstrating their expertise without feeling threatened or defensive. As the main course was served, Victoria's commentary evolved toward more specific recommendations about immediate steps I could take to begin improving my financial situation. She suggested that I should start by creating a detailed budget that tracked all income and expenses, allowing me to identify areas where spending could be reduced and savings could be increased. She offered to review my budget and provide suggestions about expense categories that might offer opportunities for improvement. Her offer to provide personal financial counseling was presented as generous assistance from someone with superior knowledge and resources, but it also represented an opportunity for her to gain detailed information about my actual financial situation. The prospect of reviewing my income, expenses, and financial goals would give her access to information that could either confirm her assumptions about my limitations or potentially reveal discrepancies that might challenge her understanding of my circumstances. The intensity and specificity of Victoria's focus on my financial education was creating increasing pressure for me to respond with appropriate gratitude and enthusiasm for her guidance. Her investment of time and attention in my situation was generating expectations that I would accept her advice and potentially provide updates about my progress in implementing her recommendations. The social dynamics of the evening were building toward a climax where my responses to her well-intentioned interference would reveal either my appreciation for her help or my resistance to accepting guidance from more successful family members. The unexpected authority entrance, the soft chiming of Eleanor's phone during the cheese course, created the first interruption in Victoria's extended financial education seminar, causing a momentary pause in her enthusiastic explanation of asset allocation strategies that she thought would benefit my modest circumstances. Eleanor glanced at the screen with the kind of professional attention that suggested the message might be important, then looked up at Grandmother Maggie with a slight questioning expression that seemed to request permission for a brief delay. Grandmother nodded graciously, indicating that Eleanor should handle whatever professional matter required her attention, while Victoria used the pause to elaborate further on her previous points about the importance of starting small with investments rather than waiting for larger amounts of money to become available. The momentary interruption had actually provided Victoria with additional opportunity to demonstrate her financial expertise to an audience that seemed increasingly impressed by her knowledge and concern for my economic development. Eleanor's brief phone conversation was conducted in the kind of low professional tones that suggested confidential business matters were being discussed, but the content wasn't clearly audible to family members, who continued their own conversations about investment strategies and wealth-building approaches. When she concluded the call and returned her attention to the table, her expression had shifted slightly towards something that seemed more focused and purposeful than her previous diplomatic observation of family dynamics. Victoria immediately resumed her presentation about investment fundamentals, apparently energized by Eleanor's presence and eager to continue demonstrating her sophisticated understanding of financial planning concepts. She explained the importance of diversification across different asset classes and geographic regions, describing how her own portfolio was structured to minimize risk while maximizing growth potential over long time periods. Her explanations were detailed enough to impress family members who lacked extensive investment experience while establishing her credibility as someone who understood advanced wealth management strategies. The continuation of Victoria's financial monologue was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside the Heritage Room, followed by quiet conversation between Manor staff members that suggested another arrival was being managed. Eleanor looked toward the doorway with what appeared to be anticipation rather than surprise, as if she had been expecting this development rather than being caught off guard by an unexpected visitor. Grandmother Maggie also seemed to be listening for something specific, her attention focused on the hallway sounds rather than on Victoria's ongoing explanation of retirement planning strategies. The subtle shift in attention from the two women who had organized the evening created a slight tension in the room that other family members began to notice, causing gradual reduction in conversation volume as people became aware that something was happening beyond their immediate discussion. The manor's head butler appeared in the doorway and approached grandmother's chair with the kind of discreet professionalism that suggested important business was being conducted. He spoke quietly near her ear, conveying information that caused her to nod with apparent satisfaction and perhaps slight relief. His message seemed to confirm something she had been anticipating rather than delivering unexpected news that might require adjustment of the evening's plans. Eleanor's response to whatever information grandmother had received was to begin organizing the papers in her briefcase with more purposeful attention than she had shown previously during the evening. Her movements suggested that the formal presentation portion of the dinner was about to begin and that she was preparing materials that would be central to the discussions that followed. The transition from social conversation to business proceedings was becoming apparent to family members who had been focused on their own interactions. Victoria's awareness of these subtle changes in atmosphere caused her to bring her current explanation to a polite conclusion while expressing anticipation for Eleanor's professional presentation about family financial planning strategies. She indicated that she was particularly interested in learning about estate planning approaches and wealth transfer techniques that might benefit families with substantial assets and complex financial situations. Her enthusiasm for the educational component of the evening reflected confidence that she would either learn valuable information or have opportunities to demonstrate her existing knowledge. The butler's return to the doorway was followed by the appearance of a distinguished gentleman whose presence immediately commanded attention from everyone in the Heritage Room. Dr. Marcus Steinberg carried himself with the kind of quiet authority that suggested significant professional achievement and extensive experience dealing with high-level financial matters. His expensive but understated clothing and confident bearing indicated someone accustomed to operating in sophisticated business environments where discretion and competence were valued above flashy displays of wealth. Eleanor's recognition of Dr. Steinberg was immediately apparent from her respectful greeting and professional acknowledgement of his arrival. She introduced him to the family as a senior partner from the forensic accounting firm that had been conducting detailed analysis of various family financial situations at grandmother's request. His specialization in complex financial investigations and asset verification had apparently made his expertise necessary for the comprehensive review that would be presented this evening. The introduction of a forensic accounting specialist created an immediate shift in the room's energy as family members began to understand that this evening's financial discussions might be more serious and detailed than they had anticipated. Victoria's confidence remained intact, but her expression showed slight concern about the level of scrutiny that forensic accounting might involve. Robert's smile became more fixed as he processed the implications of having professional investigators examining family financial situations. Dr. Steinberg's explanation of his role in the evening's proceedings was delivered with the kind of calm professionalism that characterized experts who regularly dealt with complex and potentially sensitive financial matters. He indicated that his firm had been conducting comprehensive analysis of family assets, liabilities, income sources, and financial management practices to provide grandmother with accurate information for inheritance planning and wealth transfer decisions. The scope of this investigation had apparently been much broader and more detailed than family members had realized. The revelation that professional forensic accountants had been examining everyone's financial situations created visible discomfort among family members who had assumed that their personal financial information remained private unless they chose to share it voluntarily. The possibility that expert investigators had been analyzing their income, expenses, assets, and debts suggested that the evening's discussions might reveal information that some family members preferred to keep confidential. Victoria's attempt to maintain her confident composure was challenged by the realization that forensic accounting specialists possessed tools and expertise that could penetrate financial facades and reveal underlying realities that might contradict public presentations. Her investment expertise and wealth management knowledge might be impressive to family members, but it would be easily evaluated by professionals who specialized in analyzing financial competence and detecting inconsistencies between claimed and actual performance. Dr. Steinberg's presence also created new context for understanding Eleanor's role in the evening's proceedings. Rather than simply providing general financial education and guidance, she would apparently be presenting findings from professional investigation that had examined each family member's actual financial situation with forensic precision. The collaborative nature of their analysis suggested that tonight's revelations would be based on documented evidence rather than assumptions or superficial observations. The shift from family social gathering to professional financial investigation was becoming clear to everyone present, though the full implications of this transition were not yet apparent to family members who had been operating under different assumptions about the evening's purpose. Victoria's enthusiasm for demonstrating her financial expertise was being replaced by concern about how her actual financial management practices might appear when subjected to professional scrutiny by experts who specialized in detecting financial problems and inconsistencies. Robert's business success claims were particularly vulnerable to forensic accounting analysis that could examine the actual performance of his construction company rather than relying on his verbal descriptions of contracts and profits. The professional investigation had apparently had access to tax returns, financial statements, bank records, and other documentation that would reveal the true condition of his business operations and personal financial management. The introduction of Dr. Steinberg marked the beginning of the evening's transition from social conversation to serious financial revelation, though the specific findings and recommendations were still to be presented. The presence of forensic accounting expertise suggested that whatever information would be shared had been thoroughly researched and documented, providing credible foundation for discussions about inheritance planning and family financial guidance that would follow. The true identity unveiling Dr. Steinberg's methodical arrangement of documents on the table created an atmosphere of professional seriousness that immediately commanded everyone's complete attention, while Eleanor began connecting her laptop to the room's presentation system with the kind of efficient preparation that suggested they had coordinated this revelation carefully. The transition from family dinner conversation to forensic financial analysis was now unmistakably underway, causing visible tension among family members who were beginning to understand that this evening would involve much more detailed examination of their financial situations than anyone had anticipated. Grandmother Maggie's formal introduction of the presentation explained that she had commissioned comprehensive financial analysis of all family members because she was concerned about inheritance planning and wanted to ensure that her wealth transfer decisions were based on accurate understanding of everyone's current circumstances and future needs. Her tone was serious but loving, indicating that this investigation had been motivated by care for family welfare rather than suspicion or distrust of anyone's financial management capabilities. The explanation that forensic accounting specialists had been examining everyone's financial situations for several months created immediate anxiety among family members who had been operating under the assumption that their personal financial information remained private unless they chose to share it. Victoria's confident demeanor showed the first signs of genuine concern as she realized that her actual investment performance and spending patterns had been subjected to professional analysis by experts who specialized in detecting financial problems and inconsistencies. Eleanor's opening comments established the scope and methodology of their investigation, explaining that they had examined tax returns, bank records, investment accounts, property holdings, debt obligations, and spending patterns to create comprehensive financial profiles for each family member. This analysis had been conducted with grandmother's authorization and legal access to family financial information, ensuring that their findings were based on documented evidence rather than assumptions or incomplete data. Dr. Steinberg's first presentation focused on general family financial trends and patterns, providing context for understanding individual situations within the broader framework of family wealth management and inheritance planning. His analysis revealed significant variations in financial management approaches, investment performance, and long-term sustainability among family members, suggesting that some individuals were building wealth effectively while others were potentially facing serious financial challenges. The preliminary findings indicated that family members' public presentations of their financial situations were not always consistent with underlying realities revealed through forensic analysis. Some individuals who appeared to be struggling financially were actually demonstrating excellent financial management and wealth accumulation, while others who projected images of prosperity and success were experiencing serious financial stress and potential sustainability problems. Victoria's growing discomfort became increasingly apparent as Dr. Steinberg's presentation moved toward more specific analysis of individual financial situations. Her confident assertions about investment expertise and wealth management competence were being implicitly challenged by the presence of professionals who possessed complete access to her actual financial records and performance data. The possibility that her claims about portfolio returns and financial success might be contradicted by documented evidence was creating visible anxiety. Eleanor's transition to individual financial profiles began with what she described as the most concerning situations that required immediate attention and possible intervention. Her professional tone conveyed both compassion and urgency as she prepared to reveal information that would be difficult for family members to hear but necessary for making informed decisions about inheritance planning and financial assistance. The first detailed case study focused on Robert and Victoria's combined financial situation, revealing a pattern of escalating debt, poor investment decisions, and unsustainable spending that had placed them in serious financial jeopardy despite their apparent prosperity and business success. Dr. Steinberg's analysis showed that their actual net worth was negative, with total debts exceeding assets by a substantial margin that continued to grow each month due to high interest obligations and continued overspending. The documentation of Victoria's trust fund depletion was particularly shocking, showing systematic withdrawal and poor investment decisions that had consumed inherited wealth at an alarming rate over the past several years. Her confidence about portfolio performance and investment expertise was contradicted by records showing consistent losses, high fees, and speculative investments that had destroyed rather than built wealth over time. Robert's business financial records revealed a construction company that was essentially bankrupt, surviving only through continued borrowing against personal assets and credit manipulation that could not be sustained much longer. His claims about profitable contracts and expansion opportunities were contradicted by financial statements showing operating losses, tax obligations, and debt service requirements that exceeded his company's capacity to generate revenue. The revelation of their true financial condition created stunned silence in the heritage room as family members processed information that completely contradicted their assumptions about Victoria and Robert's prosperity and financial competence. The couple's expensive lifestyle and confident financial advice had been funded by debt accumulation and asset depletion rather than sustainable wealth generation, creating a facade of success that masked approaching financial collapse. Victoria's face had gone pale as the extent of her financial deception was revealed to family members who had looked to her for guidance and inspiration about wealth building and investment strategies. Her expertise and sophisticated financial knowledge had produced results that were precisely opposite to what she had claimed, destroying wealth rather than building it, despite access to substantial inherited resources and high income. Eleanor's presentation continued with analysis of other family members' situations, revealing additional discrepancies between public presentations and documented financial realities. Uncle David's divorce proceedings had indeed created serious financial stress, but his situation was more manageable than Robert and Victoria's complete financial collapse. The younger family members showed varying degrees of financial competence, with some demonstrating promising wealth-building approaches, while others were following potentially dangerous patterns. Dr. Steinberg's attention then turned to what he described as the evening's most surprising finding: a family member whose actual financial situation was dramatically different from what everyone believed, and whose approach to wealth building represented the most successful strategy among all individuals analyzed. His introduction of this case study was delivered with the kind of professional admiration typically reserved for exceptional examples of financial competence and strategic thinking. Eleanor's presentation of my financial profile began with documentation of systematic wealth accumulation that had been achieved through disciplined saving, intelligent investing, and strategic lifestyle choices over an 8-year period. The investment account balances and portfolio performance data she displayed on the screen represented wealth accumulation that exceeded what most family members had achieved, despite their higher incomes and inherited advantages. The revelation of my actual net worth created immediate shock and disbelief among family members who had spent the evening offering financial advice and expressing concern about my economic limitations. The numbers Eleanor presented showed investment accounts, retirement savings, and asset accumulation that placed me among the most financially secure family members, despite my modest lifestyle and apparent economic struggles. Dr. Steinberg's analysis of my investment strategy and financial management approach provided detailed explanation of how consistent saving, low-cost index fund investing, and strategic lifestyle choices had produced superior wealth-building results compared to the high-income, high-spending approaches that other family members had pursued. My apparent poverty had actually been strategic frugality that maximized wealth accumulation while minimizing financial risk and social pressure. The documentation included detailed comparison of investment returns, showing how my simple, disciplined approach had outperformed Victoria's sophisticated investment strategies and Robert's business ventures by substantial margins over the same time period. While they had been destroying wealth through poor decisions and expensive lifestyle choices, I had been building financial independence through approaches they had dismissed as inadequate and unsophisticated. Victoria's expression showed complete devastation as she realized that the family member she had been patronizing and offering basic financial education actually possessed superior wealth-building results and investment competence. Her condescending advice about retirement planning and budgeting strategies had been directed toward someone who had already achieved the kind of financial independence she thought she was working toward, but was actually moving away from, through her poor decisions. The revelation transformed everyone's understanding of family financial dynamics and individual competence in ways that would permanently alter relationships and social hierarchies. The evening's intended purpose of providing financial education and guidance had been replaced by dramatic exposure of financial realities that contradicted all previous assumptions about success, competence, and wealth management effectiveness among family members. The systematic evidence presentation. Dr. Steinberg's methodical presentation of financial evidence continued with forensic precision, displaying documentation that revealed the full extent of Victoria and Robert's financial deception, while simultaneously demonstrating the sophisticated wealth-building strategy I had implemented over nearly a decade. The contrast between their apparent success and actual failure, juxtaposed against my apparent struggle and real prosperity, created a dramatic reversal that left family members struggling to process information that contradicted everything they thought they understood about financial competence and success. The detailed analysis of Victoria's investment portfolio revealed a pattern of consistently poor decision-making that had systematically destroyed inherited wealth through speculative investments, high-fee financial products, and emotional trading decisions that violated every principle of sound money management. Steinberg displayed her actual investment returns over the past 5 years, showing consistent losses that averaged -12% annually, while she had been claiming superior performance and offering investment advice to family members who trusted her expertise. Her trust fund depletion was documented through bank records and investment statements that showed systematic withdrawals to fund lifestyle expenses that far exceeded any reasonable sustainable rate. The forensic analysis revealed that she had consumed over $2 million in inherited wealth over 7 years, not through business investments or productive assets, but through luxury purchases, expensive vacations, and lifestyle inflation that had provided temporary satisfaction while destroying long-term financial security. Robert's business financial records paint an equally devastating picture of entrepreneurial failure masked by creative accounting and financial manipulation. Dr. Steinberg presented tax returns and financial statements that showed his construction company had generated actual losses in 4 of the past 5 years, surviving only through personal guarantees, asset pledges, and credit arrangements that had transferred business debt to personal obligations. His confident discussions about profitable contracts and expansion opportunities had been based on hope rather than reality, while his actual financial situation deteriorated steadily despite his optimistic presentations. The forensic examination revealed that Robert and Victoria had been borrowing money from family members under false pretenses, using different stories and justifications to obtain loans they had no realistic ability to repay. Uncle David had co-signed a $50,000 business loan that Robert claimed was for equipment purchases, but had actually used to pay credit card bills and mortgage payments. Cousin Jennifer had lent Victoria $30,000 for what was described as a temporary cash flow issue, but had been spent on luxury purchases and vacation expenses. Their combined debt obligations now exceeded $800,000, with monthly service requirements that were impossible to meet through their actual income sources. The analysis projected that without dramatic intervention, they would face bankruptcy, foreclosure, and potential legal action from creditors within 6 months. Their expensive lifestyle and confident financial presentations had been funded through systematic deception that was approaching inevitable collapse. Eleanor's presentation then shifted to documentation of my actual financial situation, revealing investment accounts and wealth accumulation that represented the most successful financial management strategy among all family members analyzed. The systematic evidence showed 8 years of disciplined saving and intelligent investing that had produced a current net worth exceeding $1.2 million, achieved entirely through earned income and strategic financial decisions rather than inheritance or business ownership. The detailed analysis of my investment approach demonstrated textbook perfect execution of wealth building principles that financial advisors typically recommended but rarely saw implemented with such consistency and discipline. My asset allocation across low-cost index funds provided optimal diversification while minimizing fees and taxes. My systematic monthly investments had taken advantage of dollar-cost averaging to build positions gradually while reducing market timing risk. My tax-advantaged account utilization had maximized growth potential while minimizing current tax obligations. Steinberg's comparison of investment performance showed that my simple low-maintenance approach had outperformed Victoria's actively managed portfolio by an average of 18% annually over the past 5 years. While she had been paying high management fees for sophisticated strategies that consistently lost money, I had been accumulating wealth through boring, reliable investments that steadily compounded over time. The mathematical superiority of my approach was undeniable when examined through objective analysis. The forensic documentation included detailed examination of my lifestyle choices and expense management, revealing strategic decisions that had maximized savings rates while maintaining reasonable quality of life. My housing costs represented only 15% of my income compared to the 40 to 60% that other family members spent on mortgage payments and property expenses. My transportation costs were minimal due to my long-term ownership of a reliable vehicle, while others spent thousands annually on car payments, insurance, and depreciation. My spending patterns showed consistent prioritization of long-term wealth building over immediate consumption, with investment contributions representing nearly 60% of my gross income over the 8-year period analyzed. This savings rate was extraordinary by any standard and had enabled wealth accumulation that would typically require much higher income levels or inherited resources. My apparent poverty had actually been strategic resource allocation that prioritized future financial independence over current lifestyle display. Eleanor's analysis included projections showing that my current investment trajectory would achieve complete financial independence within another 7 years, with passive investment income sufficient to support comfortable living expenses without requiring continued employment. My wealth accumulation was on pace to exceed what most family members would inherit from grandmother's estate, achieved entirely through personal discipline and intelligent financial management rather than dependence on family wealth transfers. The revelation that I had been building substantial wealth while appearing financially struggling created cognitive dissonance among family members who had spent years offering advice and expressing concern about my economic limitations. Victoria's condescending guidance about budgeting and investment basics had been directed toward someone who was already implementing these strategies more effectively than she was. Robert's suggestions about career advancement and income improvement had been offered to someone whose wealth was growing faster than his business profits, even during successful years. Dr. Steinberg's presentation continued with analysis of specific investment decisions that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of financial markets and economic principles. My portfolio construction showed awareness of asset correlation, geographic diversification, and risk management that exceeded what most individual investors achieved even with professional guidance. My rebalancing strategy and tax loss harvesting indicated knowledge of advanced portfolio management techniques that optimized returns while minimizing tax obligations. The forensic examination revealed that I had been consulting with fee-only financial advisors and continuing my financial education through books, courses, and professional resources that had enhanced my investment knowledge and strategy over time. My approach to wealth building was not accidental or intuitive, but represented deliberate study and implementation of proven financial principles applied with exceptional discipline and consistency. Eleanor displayed documentation showing that my investment accounts were held at multiple reputable institutions with appropriate insurance coverage and regulatory protection. My estate planning included properly structured beneficiary designations, power of attorney arrangements, and basic will provisions that protected my accumulated wealth and ensured appropriate distribution according to my wishes. My financial management extended beyond simple accumulation to include proper protection and planning for various contingencies. The comparison between my systematic wealth building and other family members' financial approaches revealed fundamental differences in understanding money management principles and long-term thinking. While others focused on income maximization and lifestyle display, I had prioritized expense minimization and systematic investing. While they pursued complex investment strategies and business ventures, I had implemented simple, proven approaches that required minimal maintenance and generated consistent results. Dr. Steinberg's analysis concluded with recommendations about inheritance planning and family financial education based on the comprehensive findings. The evidence clearly indicated that traditional assumptions about financial competence and success were not reliable indicators of actual wealth-building effectiveness. Family members, who appeared most financially sophisticated, had achieved the worst results, while the individual, who seemed least knowledgeable, had demonstrated superior financial management and investment performance. The systematic presentation of evidence had completely reversed everyone's understanding of family financial dynamics and individual competence. Victoria's position as the family's financial expert had been thoroughly discredited by documentation of consistent failure and wealth destruction. My status as the family's financial charity case had been replaced by recognition as the most successful wealth builder among all family members analyzed. The evening's intended purpose of providing financial education had been transformed into dramatic revelation of financial realities that contradicted all previous assumptions and relationships. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.